Success on the racetrack is built on relationships between owners, trainers, breeders, and horses themselves. That's why at Dean Dorton, our team takes a personal approach to everything we do. For years, we've had the privilege of working alongside thoroughbred owners and industry organizations, providing full-service support through one trusted team. From tax planning to accounting, advisory, and technology services, we help simplify operations and support long-term success. We believe the best advice comes from truly understanding your goals, your operation, and what matters most to you. As presenting sponsors of OwnerView, we're honored to support education that empowers thoroughbred owners. Visit deandorton.com/equine to learn more about how Dean Dorton's equine team can help you gain a winning edge. That's deandorton.com/equine. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's discussion.
Here in the ridiculous 7, we're in the 4,000,007.
And they're off.
100,000 is all. 5 million now. Once
Coming up the rail. Opened up and won it by 7.
going to give 8,200,000.
At the line, it'll be close.
5 million two. 5 million two.
The 3-year-old wins the stall.
1,200,000. 1,500,000. Everybody 5 you.
55.09 seconds for the first half mile.
Round 2, and we're going to go 6-2.
21-3 for the 16th to go.
500,000. That's 700.
Steady progress to nail them all on the wire. Photo finish for the win.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the 2026 Virtual Thoroughbred Owner Conference Series. I'm Gary Falter with the Jockey Club, and this is the first of 10 panels in our series of webinars that take place this year. And today's panel topic is breeding to race, and that's a topic that's been and still has been talked about as it relates to the foal crop, and we're going to have an excellent discussion today. So we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of breeding to race. And as the panel progresses, please use the Q&A feature that you'll see on your screen to send us a question. And at the end of the session, we'll try to get to as many questions as time allows. So before we get started with the panelists, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our sponsors. And I want to start with the presenting sponsors, and that would be Bessemer Trust, our friends at Keeneland, and at Dean Dorton Equine. And our panel sponsors today are the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association and Airdrie Stud. And the Q&A sponsor is West Point Thoroughbreds. And our sincere thank you to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership and to this webinar series. So there's all the sponsors we have this year. It's a great group, and we thank you very much. So we're fortunate to have 4 speakers today who have considerable experience in breeding racehorses. And so I'd like to introduce our speakers, and I'm going to start with Kate Galvin. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Kate is with Godolphin. We also know as Darley Stallions. And then we're going to introduce next Leonard Green. Len, welcome.
Pleasure being here, sir.
Good to have you back, and he and his son operate DJ Stable. Next, I'd like to introduce Carrie Brogdon. Carrie?
Greetings. Hi, how is everyone?
On the road, I see. And Carrie is the owner and operator of Mockmar Hall. And next is Walker Hancock. Walker, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
And Walker operates in the famous Claiborne Farm up in Paris, Kentucky. So let's get started, panelists, with some questions. And we're going to start off by talking about some of the really good reasons to breed, to own your own racehorses, to breed to race. And then we're going to follow up with some of the realities of doing so. So I'm going to start off with a question that will just kind of go around the table and give everybody a chance to answer. So let me just ask you, in your opinion, what is the number one reason an owner would choose to breed their own racehorses? So Len, why don't we start with you? What would be the number one reason you would breed your own racehorses?
Okay, we had a great year last year. We were 4th in the nation in wins and graded wins. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we breed our own horses. And by doing that, we can actually say, hey, let's breed speed of the mare to the stoutness of a stallion, and then let's take that foal and at its own pace, okay, let it start doing its job as far as the 2 furlongs and 3 furlongs, etc. kind of thing. So we're not pushing the horse to be ready for a sale, because an awful lot of the sales people are buying based on whether you hit 9 seconds or 10 seconds. So that's a real good reason, I think, for going through the process that we do, which is breeding to race.
And so what I understand you're saying is you have the control of that horse and its progress to your satisfaction. Good.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Carrie, how would you like to answer that? What's the number one reason why you would breed a horse to race?
Well, for me, it would be developing the bloodlines. So if we start with a mare and we're starting to keep a lot of our better bred fillies. And I think that is a big thing that we as a farm really enjoy. Now we have generations of fillies and horses that we have. Like we have a mare named Clear Voice that we raced, and she has a baby on the ground, and we had her second dam and her third dam. So now we're talking 4th generation. So it's a great way of being able to keep and develop those families and get rewarded for doing that.
Okay, very good. And Walker, well, how would you like to add to that? Because Claiborne Farm is bred for many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to cultivate families. As Carrie mentioned, it's, we have 8th, 9th, 10th generation families that we've worked with over the years. And when you're able to breed to race, you can kind of pick and choose your stallions, as Lynn mentioned, and add a little speed here. Maybe next year you're going to add a little distance, see what that looks like, or maybe add a little stronger hind leg or whatever. You can really kind of critique your own horses and make your own horses in a weird way. But it's also very rewarding as well. I would say that for me, that's one of the reasons we do it. When you see that baby born, you're there sometimes the first day or even with it being born, and when you see it win a race, it's like when your kids winning an accomplishment in a sport. It's a great sense of accomplishment.
Well, we'll talk about that more as we go on. Kate, what would you like to add to this?
Echoing everybody's comments, obviously it's, a great way to, from Len's perspective, you have a little bit of, you try to have some control in what your end goal is. There's no guarantees with breeding, but there's definitely no guarantees when you go to buy horses at the sales that you're going to come home with what you need. So you have a little bit of that front end control, and just to kind of echo Walker, I mean, the passion that you have for horses on the racetrack. If you haven't been introduced to the farm side of it, and seeing all the work that goes into it and all the planning, it just adds a whole nother level of kind of gratification when it goes well.
Okay. So next question, again, we'll go around the horn here. Talk about what it's like to breed your mare. You see her deliver a healthy foal. You watch that foal grow into a beautiful racehorse, and ultimately watch the horse you bred win its first race, or even go on to win major races. I mean, I've even heard it said, when you breed one to race, it's almost like watching your son and daughter in sports. Carrie, is that help us out here.
I mean, let me tell you, we bred a horse named Steel Sunshine. He didn't pass the vet. He's never passed the vet in his entire life, and he's won $850,000 now. And he won a grade 2. He won the Gulfstream Park Mile, and I had a glass of red wine in my hand. And I just remember my brain being like, put that thing down right now, because we went bonkers, crazy. I mean, it was a race sponsored by Coolmore, so all the Coolmore staff was there that we breed and their mares, and I can't, if we could bottle that feeling and sell it, it would, it's almost indescribable. And you have the pictures when they were a baby and when they got older, and you choose the trainer and you see through the development. And it's, to me, just mind boggling when everyone says they can't, and the horse says, yes, I can. And so we've gotten to do more and more of that right now. And I just think it's an overwhelming feeling. It's just, I don't know if you can describe it. I mean, I have 3 kids, and the birth of them was exciting and amazing, but it was also very painful. So here's like this kind of exhilarating, incredible feeling with it's, gosh, it's just so hard for me to describe. And I'm sure everyone on this panel, I mean, has felt that same rush.
Well, Len, you buy horses at the sale, you breed horses to race. What's that like on one that you bred, and does it compare at all to a horse that you bought that does well?
Okay, I'm going to kind of separate myself from the other 3 panelists, okay, because I don't want to have the feeling that Kerry has, because I want to be able to make decisions on whether we should sell them or not, what races we're going to be putting them in. Do we eventually down the road put them into a claiming race, and which means we could lose the horse? So I try to separate the business part of it from the personal part of it. Not that I don't get a thrill when they call and say at 1 o'clock in the morning, well, we got a colt. That's great. How about calling me at 7 o'clock and telling me how well the colt is doing? So again, I'm not trying to put down people who are involved in the business. Thank goodness they're there. But I try to separate it, okay? And I feel much better when my kids are born, and I feel no pain.
Well, no, but you're making a good point, because there are so many variety of ways to look at this, from a emotional, from a business and involvement point of view. So Walker, lots and lots of foals being born at Claiborne Farm over the years, many of them gone on and done some great things. Why don't you talk about your involvement in that and just what it's like to see one of those go from the foaling barn to the racetrack?
Yeah, I might have jumped the gun on the last answer I had, but
That's all right.
again, it's extremely gratifying. I mean, you cultivate these families over generations. You put time and effort into their mating, and God knows what can happen between the time that they're a foal and time they get to the racetrack. It's almost a simple sense of accomplishment when they get to the starting gate. And you don't take it for granted every time they win. Even no matter what track it's at, if it's a claiming race, maiden, allowance, grade 6, grade 1's even better. But obviously, you're just so proud, and you leave the racetrack smiling that day, no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get down to some of the nuts and bolts, because Kate, I want to take the next question directly to you, and it's going to kind of segue into what we just talked about. So for many, many years, Godolphin Darley was the leading buyer of top yearlings at all the sales worldwide, be it Keeneland, Saratoga, Fasig-Tipton, over across seas. And at the same time, you raced many of the homebreds at the same time. But in more recent years, it just seems like more and more of the racehorses there at Godolphin are homebreds. And recently, Cody's Wish and Sovereignty, both horses of the year, were bred and raced by Godolphin. So help us understand, did the strategy change at some point to go from a serious major buyer at the sales to more of an organization that breeds to race? And if so, what caused that?
It's such a good question, and we get asked it a lot. And it's kind of multifaceted. I think like I've kind of lived through it. And the big thing I always explain it as is we were in America a very young organization. Right, around 2000 when Sheikh Mohammed, first bought property in Kentucky and invested millions and millions of dollars in everything from the land and developing the land to buying the bloodstock. And with any organization, whether you're a horse farm or if you own a tire company, like you're gonna live and learn. You're gonna figure out what works for you. You're gonna learn more about your employees in the horse industry. You learn more about your mares. You learn more about the industry around you, your competition. And so I always kind of chalk it up to a lot of it was maturity as an organization. And I think that's very people oriented. I think it's proof that your people need to be a big thing that you invest in. And I, give a ton of credit, obviously, to the leadership in America for Godolphin, Dan Pride and Michael Banahan. And they've really, from the beginning, gotten us to where we are now. And, another major, and then alongside of that maturity that was happening, and that maturity, like another thing I wanted to touch on is you make these initial huge broodmare purchases if you're an operation like Godolphin, but it's now their daughters that are putting horses in the stallion barn. And that is something that took 20 years. So again, this development of the assets. And then on top of that, our organization, it's huge. We have an owner who, this is something he gets a lot of joy out of. So if it didn't make sense, that was okay. And I would say for a very long time, obviously we were breeding American horses, but running them in Europe. And so that probably didn't make sense. And at some point, we stopped doing that. And obviously, I think that you saw we started using outside stallions. For many years, our American mares were basically bred to 3 or 4 core stallions on our own roster. And as that started to evolve, then we obviously were able to diversify and give the mares exactly what they needed. And then the proof of that is, hopefully we're going to keep going in the direction we've been in. But you hope that those are the kind of the decisions that have made a difference in helping us become just purely a breed to race operation.
Okay. So talk about your stallions, your mares. Do you put more emphasis on selecting the stallion or on your mares, or exactly how does Godolphin go about making those mating decisions?
Yeah, when the mating decisions get made, I would say, everybody just at every organization, I'm sure it's similar, but we really are focusing on what is the best option for this mare. This year we're using 32 different stallions for about 155, 160 mares. And 21 of those are outside stallions. And their price points, range from around $10,000 all the way up, to the Not This Times and the Gun Runners and Into Mischiefs.
Right.
So we truly try to choose the best option for each mare. And, a really interesting thing I learned last year when Michael Banahan told me that we were going to breed Pretty Mischievous to Street Sense. And obviously I was thrilled as a nomination salesperson. This is great marketing for Street Sense. And he said, look at our stallion barn. Street Sense has been so good to us. It's her first foal. We'll see what it looks like. And then the year after we put, the big stud fee in her, and she is going to go to Gun Runner this year, but she had a gorgeous Street Sense colt. And, but I wouldn't say that decision was made for Street Sense. It was made for Pretty Mischievous.
Okay. And is it safe to say that all those mating decisions you're making are breed to race? You're not really a commercial operation selling yearlings.
Definitely. There's mares that we know are probably going to be sold that year. And so, but ultimately we're trying to just make the right decision for the mare.
Okay. All right. So let's jump over to Walker. Walker, same thing. Talk about some of the strategies that Claiborne Farm has in breeding to race your thoroughbred. So if you could just share some of your thoughts on that, your strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of gonna. Kate made a great point there. I mean, she has a great mare like Pretty Mischievous, and you go for a horse like Street Sense that's just proven over and over again that he's a quality racehorse. And from my perspective, I like breeding Street Sense because he's only 40,000, 50,000, whatever it is, versus a horse that's Constitution 110 or not at the time 250. You can actually get your mare in full to a really proven horse, get a kind of a gauge on how good she might be based off her first fall, which is obviously gone to proven sire. So we like breeding all our young mares to proven horses. We obviously breed to race primarily, or half our mares are kind of breed to race, so the other half are breed to sell. But certainly the ones that are breed to race, we go to Street Sense and those type, hard spun, blame, etc. Just because we value getting those mares off to a really good start.
Okay, using those proven stallions. Yeah.
Yes.
So Walker, do you know, and maybe anybody on the panel, are there financial incentives or bonuses for owners that breed to race their thoroughbreds? I mean, we know there are breeder awards out there. Kentucky has them. Nearly every state has breeders awards, but does anybody know of any incentives that are out there for a breeder to race those foals?
I don't know of any incentives other than what you get as a breeder of the horse if it wins a race. But they have these maiden auction races, and I've actually talked to the guys at Churchill about potentially writing like a maiden race for only owner breeders. They're looking at ways to write different races, and I thought it'd be a really good idea if the owner and breeder were on the same entity. You should write a race for those type. It might incentivize breeders to maybe keeps more horses in training instead of going to the sales ring.
Okay, Carrie, I see you nodding your head, Carrie.
Well, I think, yeah, I saw that on Twitter that somebody had suggested that, and I think it's a great idea. Not only that, like we had 2 fillies that were running, and they basically needed to go from where they were to 50 claimers to be to be competitive. But if we had a breed to race type scenario, these 2 sound fillies that we ended up retiring because I didn't want to run them for tags would have other options. So you would have bigger fields and you'd be able to protect those fillies you don't want to lose. I think actually Craig from Glen Hill Farm is one of the people that chimed in on that. And that is a big, we don't want to retire sound fillies. Sometimes we have to because they are not competitive in these type of races. You might find a better niche for those.
Okay.
Gary, let me throw in also that the part of our program is to breed to stallions that stand in other states or in Canada, okay, so that we can be eligible for these special races of horses bred in that state or that country kind of thing. And that gives you a competitive advantage also, okay, because again, you're running against not the top horses, but just the top horses in that state kind of thing. And then I see that Canada now and New York is putting together a program. Okay, so now you can run a Canadian horse not only in Canada, but you can run them in New York and New York, vice versa, in special races. So slowly but surely, the industry suddenly puts on they take off their blinkers and they look and say, hey, what can we do to make things a little bit better for our state breds? And that's what I think makes sense.
Great. I'd like to remind the audience that if you have a question for the panelists, we'll get to them at the end, but please be sure to use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature that you might see on your screen, because we're just going to keep going with our dialogue and we'll get to the Q&A at the end. So if you did put a question in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just moving over to Q&A and we'll get to those later. Great. So
Gary, can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I think for the audience, okay, many of them are in businesses, okay, where they've developed business plans and strategy and other things. I think they have to then say, hey, that's not just for their business. Put it into the horse side of it and actually have a strategy and learn from it and make changes every year, as the other panelists have already said. It's those people who say, we're always going to do the same thing because that's the thing that's been done all the way. That's wrong. Okay, I think it's wrong because I think times are changing all the time, and you have to continually look at your program and say, okay, if I've only bred to resale, maybe it's time to say, hey, on certain ones, let's try to breed, okay, to keep on going and things.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question for Carrie. So, Carrie, I know you're a commercial breeder and you have horses that race at the track. Talk about your strategies in breeding for the commercial market and or breeding to race. Are those strategies one and the same, or do you have a different strategy for each?
It would absolutely be the same. And I think our philosophy, listening to Len, very, very true. Our philosophy is we want racehorses first, sales horses second. And so we have changed and morphed. And for example, I watched Airdrie's program, and Airdrie leaves all their colts together. We used to separate our colts in February. And then we looked at some of the very successful programs, and I'm like, why are we separating these colts? The more they're together and bang into each other and fight, and that gets them to be big and strong and sound. So we stopped that practice. So now all of our colts stay together in big groups until the 60 days of prep. Then we split them, and we changed that philosophy, I'd say 4 years ago. And I think we've seen results from it. So for us, we want to produce the racehorses above all. And that happens whether we're deciding on what mares, what to breed to what stallions, what mares, because that's ultimately, if you're selling, you have to have a good product. And if you're racing, you have to have a good product. And I've certainly recently learned, so we took two very well-bred horses that were marginal physicals. And I was like, well, they're so beautifully bred, let's run them. And then we run a lot of the non-vetters, and there's a plethora of them now, and several of them are stakes horses. The two horses that were marginal physicals that we decided to race cannot run a jump, literally a jump. And I'm like, oh my gosh, one is being rehomed as an OTTB already. And so I learned from racing my own why the physical is paramount to all in the sale, because that is what's running. And I learned it from breeding to race.
Okay,
Very good.
very good.
Yeah.
So Walker, let me ask you, Claiborne breeds an awful lot of mares, stallions. You sell a lot of things commercially, you race a lot of horses. Talk about those mating decisions, and do your decisions vary whether you're going to race them or sell them?
Yeah, if you're going to race them, you certainly don't mind going to the non-commercial horses. Like, kind of tell them, I said, but a horse like Blaine, we breed a lot to Blaine just because we don't mind running them. They don't always sell the best, although he did have a horse sell for 400,000 last week at OBS. But if you look at his averages for what he is below the commercial probably benchmark. But if you believe in a horse, we breed to him regardless. We always try and breed race horses. That's what we're going to do here. That's what we've always done. That's why we've been around for over 110 years. The sales are kind of certainly more a part of the operation now than they used to be. But as Lynn said, that's why you have to change your programs other years. You can't do the same thing each and every year. We try and change with the times. And yes, we certainly kind of have a pot of mares that are breed to race and a pot of mares that are breed to sell. We do treat them a little differently, but at the end of the day, we're still always going to try and breed the best racehorse we can.
Okay. All right. Well, that segues into my next topic, which I think is an important topic. So many commercial breeders, they select the young first or second year stallions for their mares. I mean, it's pretty common. It seems like the market prefers these young sires over the more proven ones. I've never quite understood that, but it is what it is. But there are a lot of proven stallions out there that have produced top quality horses year after year. We've already mentioned at Darley, the sire hard spun. The horse has 44 graded stakes winners, and you can breed to him for, what is it this year, Kate, 20,000?
20,000.
Yeah. Then you have Frosted and Midshipman, same thing. That can get you an excellent top quality racehorse. And at Claiborne, you've already mentioned this, Walker, Blaine stands for 25,000, has over 25 graded stakes winners, can get you any kind of a racehorse. May not be as commercial, but if you're breeding to race, there are countless stallions that are similar to this. So my question is, for the audience, is it a better option for an owner that plans to breed to race to visit these proven stallions versus breeding their fillies and mares to the young, unproven stallions that are very popular at the sales? Just like to get everybody's opinion on that. So who would like to start on that one?
if you're breeding to race, I would not go to a freshman sire. I mean, 4 out of 5 of them are going to fail. So why would you want to take that, put more risk on the table than you already have? So I personally, if I was starting up a program, I would solely breed to those proven horses in like the $10,000 to $50,000 range.
You talk about some of those values, Carrie. I mean, they're out there. Kate, these horses that, they've just produced stakes winner after stakes winner, and I would assume their books are not full, and yet a breeder who wants to breed to race can often get really good deals.
I think,
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
I mean,
Carrie.
sorry, Kate. I mean, hard spun is a big one. I mean, to me, you look at a horse like Candy Ride, who is he's still absolutely incredibly fertile. He's probably the best sire of sires in the nation. And yet you can get to him for, I mean, I think I saw a season in him recently for 42,000 and, breeding right season. And I mean, but he doesn't throw the commercial sales horse. He likes to throw small foot and all this stuff. So I think, yeah, the commercial market has definitely weighed heavily on where people breed. I will say though, Rob Tribbett and I were talking, and he said that historically, even if you look at Into Mischief's first crop, their first crop has the biggest percentage of graded stakes winners. So there is some data to back up the first crop sire phenomenon. Now, I don't know if that is because of the mare quality. Kate would probably have much better insight into that.
Yeah, I think that like where my brain was going as you said that, Carrie, we always talk about whenever you have, the first crop is when they're most valuable until they have runners, and then they either get more valuable or less valuable. And so not only are you probably getting slightly stronger mares, at every step it's stronger. They're probably getting pinhooked by stronger pinhookers. They're probably getting purchased by a stronger owner who, whether it's just patience or their access to a better trainer. So I agree. I mean, we definitely see that year after year where their first crop is, basically their strongest. And then you kind of see what happens after 4 years. But the other thing two other thoughts I had. One is sometimes these horses that aren't as commercial at the yearling sales, and actually Walker, you touched on it. It's like, if it really is the right thing for your mare and you're like, I'm going to be an outlier and I'm going to, still breed my mare to this stallion that's not super commercial, but I am a commercial breeder and I get a good result and I go to the sales, and you end up not getting, what you want at the yearling sales. A lot of times that group of stallions does perform well at the 2-year-old sales, because when you're there, you're not going to hit the top of the market with that pedigree, but you have a lot more going for you if you breeze fast and you look the part and you vet, and it's not as much about stallion, again, if you're not at the top of the market. But it is interesting. And, again and again, as a person who, takes a lot of calls from breeders and has plenty of breed to race clients, they absolutely land on the horses that you listed, Gary, Frosted, Midshipman, Hard Spun. And I do think there's always that possibility. And we've seen it with Midshipman probably 3 times in the cycles of his career at age 21 now. You do this the whole time. And, he just is coming off another really strong year at the yearling sales, and now he's booked full again. And, you do the cycle, and now those are going to be the yearlings that they're going to be born in 27, yearlings in 28, they'll be running in 29. I mean, he's probably not going to be breeding still then, but if he was, then he'd be crazy popular again, and it would just go in these cycles. So I do think if you are a breed to race minded person, but there's a possibility that everything's always for sale. Some of these horses can really improve your mare and also give you a good result in the sales ring if you time it right with that cycle.
Yeah. Len, you're thinking all about business and how this works. Talk about breeding your young fillies off the track to race and the stallion selection process.
Yeah, again, I go back to, let's say you were going to buy a baseball team or you're going to buy a football team, okay, you certainly would want not all quarterbacks or not all home run hitters. You'd like a variety of them so you could melt it together. So that's the same thing I think that you do in the horse business, whether you're starting out or whether you've been there for a while. You say, hey, what is my strategy? Do I want to put all my beans in one pot? Okay, or do I want to say, hey, let's see if we can try different, same as we tried different mares and different stallion combinations. You got to say, hey, I got to do the same thing here. Okay, if a horse shows something early, okay, maybe I'll change my mind and say, hey, maybe this is a good sales, okay, product because it's doing a 9 something or other. It looks the part or something else. If it's so again, we don't have a set thing that says we are doing 50% for commercial and 50% to race. We let the horses kind of tell us, okay, where they are. We experiment with different stallions. The ones that we have are proven, like the hard spuns, etc., that year in and year out are worthwhile. But then, okay, when I mean, again, we're also in the accounting business. Okay, so we have the advantage of having 800 clients. Okay, and we can see what they're doing. Okay, which is a great advantage because you can see their philosophy, and then you can see 1 or 2 or 3 years down the road whether it's worked out or not worked out. And we can see the ones that get into the business and spend millions just because a horse does a 9 something or other, and then you never see it again. So we have the advantage of doing it. But the last thing, so I don't remember, my wife was a Mensa genius, so I named the horse Mensa. Okay, and it showed something, but not very much. So John sold it. Okay, and he pointed out and he sold it for $400,000 or $500,000. And he pointed out the other day, he said, Dad, if you're really mad at me still after all these years, it's now a claimer for 5,000. You can go out and buy it. So
that does happen, that's for sure. So, it's been said that if you want to breed to race, you better be a patient person. Is that a fair statement to say?
Very much so, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because I want to talk about the timeline, what it's going to take if somebody's considering being an owner and breeding their own racehorses. So you need to make a mating decision. You got a filly off the track. Maybe you've got a broodmare that you bought, and you need to mate it, pick a stallion to breed it to. So Carrie, what's that process? You call up a bunch of stallion farms and say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. How do you proceed to make that decision that this is a stallion we're going to?
No, we don't do that at all. We sit down, my mom, my husband and I, we sit down and we powwow about we try to look at them all without rose-colored glasses. We sit down and say, these are the physical faults, because going back to the superior physicals, like every single graded stakes winner off our farm, and I bet you it's the same with all these guys, the top 30% of physicals become the graded stakes winners. That there was one filly that we had that became became a graded stakes winner, and she was itty bitty. And I think she was even named something like itty bitty, but she was beautifully made, but she was small. But other than that, so for us, it's physical above all.
So when do you start that? When do you start that process? October, November of the year before? I'm trying to get a timeline here.
Oh, we will sit down. We normally try to do it right after the October sale, if not a little bit before. Actually, we'll start the discussions in August because Spendthrift likes to do a lot of their bookings early, so they force our hands to decide more on, if we want to go to Into Mischief or something like that. So we'll start those discussions in August, but we also all the way through the year. And when we purchase these mares or we race these mares, we have these discussions. This is a little mare. We want to be careful. We don't want to get a little peanut. This is a big mare. We want to be careful. We don't want to get a giraffe. So for us, it's very, very, very much discussing. And then also like whether you're breed to race or breed to sell. Well, if this is all turf family, do you want to go to a dirt stallion or vice versa? So I think that for us, it's more discussions. We as a family farm sit down and agree on where we'd like to go, and then we call. And then, for example, I'll call Kate Galvin and I'll be like, okay, what about this for these particular stallions? So we've already made a lot of our wish lists ahead of time before we contact the stallion farms.
Okay, all right. So that decision's made, Kate, and it's time to breed your mare. Talk about how long that mare is going to carry that foal, any special treatment she's going to get during that pregnancy, whether it's medical, whether it's feeding, whether it's in a stall. So just give the audience an idea of what's next after the mare has been bred.
Well, it's an 11-month gestation. Very, a lot of, vet work and very closely monitored, in the breeding process until she's safely in foal. And that's going to basically, it's kind of a heavy lifting time of year on breeding farms. So it's an expensive time of year if you're, boarding your mare somewhere, because they're, basically handling her every day and giving her kind of more special treatment. That's going to carry over. Hopefully, it's not always going to be the case where she has a baby and gets pregnant on her first trip to the breeding shed. That's ideal. And if that happens, I think I don't want to say it's lucky, but I would say you have yourself, a nice fertile mare, and you went to a nice fertile stallion and everything is going good. It probably won't happen that way every time. And that is, part of the patience aspect of it is, she may have to go back to the breeding shed more than once. Hopefully by the end of the breeding season, she's pregnant. The summer and fall months for the mares are going to be a little bit more just, treating them like a horse, a lot more time outside. During that time, the mare will get weaned if she had a foal. And as an owner, then you'll have 2 horses bills to pay for.
Right.
And then, you'll obviously go into the fall and the cycle starts again.
Okay. So Walker, that mare has been carrying that foal for 11 months. Somebody's watching her. She's going to foal soon. Talk about that whole foaling process and what it takes to get that healthy foal on the ground.
Yeah, there's, about 11 months, you'll put them in the foaling barn. We have people there 24 hours a day, at least two to 4 people watching the mares. As they come up, they'll kind of start to get hot. They'll kind of get restless, maybe start pawing, rolling around. So they're starting to show some signs, and then just like a human, their water will break, and you want to make sure that the foal's lined up correctly and ready to come out. Hopefully not a dystocia or any other issues, and hopefully you get a live foal. You
generally have attendants there in case the mare need help.
Oh yeah, we assist every mare, or end up about 98%. Every once in a while, one will lay down in the field and fall on itself by itself really quickly, but I'd say most of them are attended. They're attended.
Okay. All right. So now the foal's born, everything's looking good. You got to raise that baby if you're going to race it. So Len, talk about what time does it take from the time it's born to the time it goes to a training center to start their training. I mean, it sounds like there's a big gap in there.
Big gap and an expensive gap, et cetera. I'm going to just go back one step for people who are listening. Okay. Let's say you get a mare. Okay. And let's say it doesn't become pregnant. Okay. Or you buy at a stale a mare. Okay. That shows gaps that it didn't breed. Okay. And to success. There is a very important decision that's made on those. Number one, you probably got that mare at auction for less than its fair market value because other people see that it doesn't get pregnant every year. That gives you an opportunity to really hit a home run. But you then have to say, hey, I want to take it not necessarily to a first-year stallion, not necessarily to a very popular stallion, because I want that mare to get the best chance to get pregnant. And sometimes the best chance to get pregnant is to bring it to a farm that the stallion is not going continuously, so that you can say your period when the mare is ready, the stallion is ready. Because if you can get that and not have to wait a year, that cost of carrying that mare for another year, if it doesn't come in, well, you can't have that many and still want to be in this business. Okay. And I'll explain that now. As far as the cost, we average about $20,000 from the time that it gets pregnant to the time it actually has the foal, to the time it actually is ready to do either go to a sale or get ready to race. And that doesn't include the stud fee, and it doesn't include the vanning, it doesn't include it's a very expensive game. Okay. If you treat it as a game, it's not such an expensive experience if you treat it like a business. Does that help?
It does. It does. Now, it sounds like the process going all the way back to when, Carrie lined up the stallion to breed to, the mare carried the foal for 11 months, foal's born. You've got probably a year and a half before the horse is ready to start its training. So it sounds like it's at least a 3-year process.
And it's a 3-year process at $2,000 or $3,000. Let's call it $3,000 now we average per year. Okay, per horse every single month. Okay,
Yep.
that adds up an awful lot. Okay, I mean, for instance, we have 200 horses. Okay, you got to have a sale of a Tiffany case for $3 million so they can cover certain things, even though you may
Sure.
not want to sell that mare because that mare has produced, several big stake winners. You got to get away from your sentimentality part of you and get into your brain part of this. This is an expensive business.
Well, that segues well into the next area I want to cover, because we've talked about the timelines. Let's talk about some of these costs and expenses if you want to breed to race. So I've got a few slides I'd like to bring up so we can talk about. So this first slide is for perhaps a stallion with a stud fee of around 25,000. That could be Blaine, that could be hard spun. You're going to have mare care in there for a year. Once that mare gets pregnant, there's going to be veterinary cost. So I'm estimating you're going to have $38,000 to $40,000 into the mare even before she has her foal. And then once she has her foal, that weanling is going to stay on the mare for probably 6 months. After 6 months, it's going to get weaned, and you're going to have 5 to 6 months of upkeep on the weanling. And then when it turns a yearling, an entire year of yearling care. And these are all estimates, and they could vary, one way or another. But for the weanling and yearling care, you'll have another $18,000 to $20,000 into the horse. And then it starts its initial training at a training center at probably something like $75 to $85 a day. And then after several months of that, it's going to go to the racetrack with the trainer, and the trainer's going to charge anywhere from $100 to $125 a day. So when you add all this up over the period from the time that you decided what stallion to breed to get the foal on the ground, to raise it properly, to get it to the racetrack, you may have upwards of $90,000 invested in this horse. And again, that can vary greatly because I haven't factored in insurance or vanning or any of that. But just to give you some ballparks. But take a look at the bottom numbers. If you went to the 2025 yearling sales and just bought an average price yearling, it's $113,000, and 2-year-olds at 105. So with a $25,000 stud fee, if you had a nice filly coming off the racetrack that you wanted to breed to get a foal out of her to race, it looks like the numbers aren't nearly as expensive as going to the sale to purchase a half a dozen yearlings at $113,000 a piece. So panel, thoughts on this? And we're going to go to another slide here in a moment.
again, I think this adds credence to a program that says we're going to breed some of our horses and we're going to buy some of our horses, okay, because of the fact that just what this slide shows, okay, and this slide's based on a stud fee, okay. If you decide to go to a new stallion where the stud fee is over 100, or you're lucky enough to go to time for change, I mean, the numbers are just they get thrown out of whack. So you almost have to have a program that has a little of both.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'd like to see the numbers. So, for example, everybody would like to race an Into Mischief. They do quite well. He's been the leading sire how many years in a row? But look at the very bottom number. If you're going to go to the sale and buy an Into Mischief, last year's yearlings average over $700,000 to buy one.
Yep.
But if you have a quality mare, and it's going to take a quality mare to get to Into Mischief, and you're approved, and you have the wherewithal to pay the stud fee, the expenses to raise that foal really don't change, whether it's a $25,000 stud fee or $250,000. You're going to have upwards of $300,000 to $350,000 invested in that horse. But if you went to the yearling sale, look at the difference that you would be paying to purchase a quality Into Mischief. Thoughts, panel? Anything?
I mean, I think the hardest thing and the most realistic thing that we have to be is, and I quote Forrest Gump a lot, as far as breeding mares, sometimes breeding is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I think that there are reasons that people buy, like Len buys, because when you go up there to buy a horse, you know that it's correct and has a good mind, and it scopes and x-rays and all the other things that go along with it, as opposed to, yay, I'm going to breed to race, and then you have a case of nocardia placentitis, and you get a mare like Special Me, who's the dam of 4 of our graded stakes winners, but the people that bred Special Me paid a very expensive stud fee in her, but because of what happened in utero, that was affected. So I think you just have to go in there eyes wide open, realizing that it is to me, having the racehorses is a very, maybe it's because I'm female, it is much more of an emotional process that I really enjoy. And yes, do we treat our farm like a business and we cull aggressively? Yes. And like Glenn said, if we have an open mare on our farm, she better warrant the carrying costs. So I think you just have to go in there eyes wide open and realize that you may have a mare that looks like Elle McPherson, and you may have a stallion that looks like Brad Pitt, but you may not get the equivalent in a foal. And I would tell you at least 50, maybe more, this panel knows, you can breed the best of the best and sometimes not get an average horse. And all of us are going to have a bell curve of foals, whether you have the mares at Darley or the mares at Mark Mahal or the mares at Claiborne or DJ. We're going to have, because of different, somebody foaled early, somebody got injured in the paddock, somebody, there's a million different things that can go right and wrong. And I just think you have to go in there eyes wide open and realize that that is going to be a case anytime you're dealing with livestock.
Okay, very good.
Wow, yes.
One more slide I had just to show the numbers with Gun Runner, another top sire. Yearlings average $900,000. The cost to raise one, and if everything went right, in that $300,000 to $350,000 range. So I just wanted to dispel the myth that it costs so much to raise a foal to race, and it does. But if you're dealing at this high level, and that could be Curlin, Justify, Not This Time, Nyquist, Constitution, Tap It, on and on and on. Sometimes you might want to consider breeding to race. Okay, enough on the financials. Let's see here. I do have a final question, and then we do have some questions in the queue, so I want to get to those. So my final question to the panel: have you ever sold a yearling that you bred and wished later you would have kept that horse to race? Who wants to start? Walter?
Oh, that's an easy one. That's
All
an
right,
easy
go
one.
ahead, Carrie.
Tepin. Why the hell did we sell Tepin? There you go.
Okay. Super horse.
Yeah,
Walter?
I sold a grade 1 winner
Yeah.
for 20,000. So yeah, I wish I didn't sell that one. But
Okay.
no, you're always happy for them, and having your name on the breeder line for a grade 1 win is
Oh,
always
yeah.
special. So but I mean,
Oh,
I say that half jokingly, but obviously financially, I wish I kept her.
We
Kate?
had a good chat with Dan Pride about this today, and he reminded me that while we sold Essential Qualities half sister, I think for 65, no, 100, I think, in full to Bernardini, to Ocala stud. And they came back and sold the package, her back and full to Nyquist for 2 million the next year. Essential Quality was champion 2-year-old. But his point, and Dan, as you guys all know, as a salesman, he's like, look, our culling operate every year. We're going to be selling 20 or 30 mares, and the best sales pitch I can make is one of these mares is going to have a huge update, and it's up to you to decide which one. So that was obviously a big one that was sold, and he also reminded we've sold a couple other grade 1 winners over the years back when we used to sell a few yearlings. So, but to Walker's point and Carrie's, like, you're always very proud, but it's hard to tell. There's outliers. They're not the physicals that you think are going to be the athletes, and then they surprise you.
Yeah. Len, how about you?
I'm going to kind of take a different approach.
All right.
If you don't sell horses that later on go on for greatness, you can have a tough time anytime you put a horse into a sale or into a digital sale, into a reduction sale. You've got to almost convince the outside public that you're not culling the only time you sell. And that's a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And if you can get over that, well, then you don't look back. Okay. You don't say in the old days, it used to be, they claim my horse, I'm going to turn around and claim their horse. Don't they know who they're claiming off of? But you can't be personal about this. You really, over and over again, Gary, I keep on saying, but it's true. You got to treat it like a business. And in a business, you sell good products so you can also sell other products.
Good point. I know at Stone Street, Barbara Banke breeds an awful lot of great horses and runs a lot through the sale, and many of them go on to do great things, and that just solidifies what she's doing. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's the WinStar program does.
Yeah.
They sell a lot, and they're constantly advertising all of the great horses that they sell for the exact reason Lynn's saying. I mean, you went there, Jake Ballast bought race day, so they're constantly having good horses out of their program. So by people buying horses from either DJ or Claiborne, or it elevates their program, whether they're racing or selling 100%.
Okay. All right. Well, it's getting close to 3 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up our discussion. So we're going to go to the Q&A session here in a moment. And while we sort through the questions, we're going to hear from our Q&A sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds. So stay with us, audience. We'll be right back with the questions.
Spine-tingling, jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring, Secretariat-like.
Okay, so first question in the queue. What is the average of getting a good foal from a broodmare? That is, out of, say, 100 mares, how many of the foals would you consider good to race or sell? Who would like to take that? A percentage? Half, 2/3, 90%?
Is the question like, how often do you get a good foal?
Yeah, if you bred 100 mares and you got 100 foals, how many of those foals would you consider good enough to either sell or race? Because there would be some that you wouldn't want to do either.
Oh, you're going to get a bell curve.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, the elite, like the late Dr. McCarthy, he was a mentor to my husband. And I remember Dr. McCarthy saying, now these top foals are going to carry your program and pay for all these other ones that are not. He said, the only problem is if one of the top foals gets injured, hurt, or killed, so they're the anchor horses that are going to carry all the rest. I mean, you look at the percentage of graded stakes winners, it's very small.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's one.
I think also though that
go ahead, Kate. Yep.
I don't know exactly what their definition of good is, but as far as getting a horse to a sale, and then obviously wherever they fall on the bell curve, some of them are going to be better contributors to the bottom line than others. But getting a horse to the sale or the track, there's certainly a majority, and then, some years are better than others, but I don't know, would you guys say at least 90% are of the live foals that are making it past 3 months of birth, they're getting there, most of them.
Yeah, I would say like 95% of them, if they get past 3 months, are going to make it to a sale or a racetrack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. So
yes, the 3 month threshold would be key.
Yeah, they might not
exactly.
sell very well or race very well, but they'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a question. I have a 3-mare operation in New York and Florida. I run a racing and breeding partnership. Can the panel, if you have any experience in racing breeding partnerships, how do you structure such a thing? So I think somebody asking a question, I'd like to breed to race, but I'd like to do it with partnerships. Who would like to maybe take that one on?
If nobody else wants it, we do about 82 partnerships, okay, as far as the accounting firm is concerned. And the smartest thing I ever told a group similar to this is, even though you have the best lawyer in the world, put a provision in there that the managing partner has the right to continue the partnership and buy out, okay, the existing partners if after racing they don't want to do breeding or they don't want to go into a sale, because you got to have that flexibility, okay, in it. Because a lot of people go in and they go in just for the racing, and maybe the racing doesn't work, and they said get rid of all the horses. That's the worst thing you can do, okay? Because maybe some of them have residual, maybe some of them are distance horses, and all you've given them is a chance to be speed horses. So put that provision in there, and then at least you increase your chances for success.
Okay. There's a question about breeding strategies. With respect to mating strategies, do you find breeding a speed-oriented sire over a stamina-laden mare, or a stamina-oriented sire to a speed-inclined broodmare?
I personally would never breed. We call it two-turn, but we're really saying do not breed slow to slow. And you don't want to go breed sprinter to sprinter. We personally always try to inject speed where we need it. And if we have speed, we will go to a two-turn horse, because ultimately we personally want to breed classic winners. My whole goal every single year is to win the Derby and the Oaks. And as an owner, that would be a dream come true. As a breeder, the closest we've gotten is second in the Oaks and 7th in the Derby. But for me, that's our own personal philosophies. There are other people that will breed like to like. I personally don't do that.
Okay, but Walker, I think the question was more speed sire to stamina mare or stamina sire to speed mare. Does it make any difference?
Yeah, to Carrie's point, you always want to add speed when you can.
Okay.
I would probably be more inclined to maybe have a I don't know. There's not any slow stallions, so I guess
Yeah.
have a speedy mare, and then you can figure out from there what stallion you want to go to.
Okay.
And Gary, the only time that would change is, let's say you are breeding to sell. Okay, you might very well want to do speed to speed, okay, and hope that you can do a 9 or a 10-second deal, because then the chances are that you can outsell your pedigree.
Okay. So when you have a mare on a late cover, the mid-May, June cover, how soon do you breed her back? And I think this especially applies to breeding to race. Do you breed on the foal heat if the foaling went well, or do you skip a year? What's the different philosophies there?
We'll breed on fall heat, but not till after May 1st. That's kind of our rule too with the stallions. But the last couple of years, we've kind of extended our breeding season further into the spring and summer, whatever. Foaling mares in January is not any fun, so we've kind of delayed our start, and in turn, we have a longer season, which ends closer to the end of May as opposed to the beginning of May.
Yeah, and I think we're like, I think the philosophy, if I was learning about this and trying to maybe put numbers down on paper as far as like how many years in a row can I expect to have a foal, which I feel like is sort of where that question came from. Like breeding back is just always going to be up to the mare to some degree. Like she's just going to have had a good foaling and, have a good enough heat. To Walker's point, like we definitely will breed on full heat. But it's typically later in the year. When hopefully the stallions have more time, they aren't as likely to get in foal on a full heat breeding, my understanding from the research. So, you absolutely can, and there's success with it if you're trying to speed up. But also if you're a breed to race operation, it probably doesn't bother you too much if you're on a mid-June cover versus a May 28th cover. Like that's kind of one and the same if you're breeding to race, I think.
Okay. Here's a question. Any special differences or consideration when breeding to race for the turf versus breeding to race for the dirt, especially here in the U.S.?
I can tell you, we bred a horse called Nitrogen for the dirt, for the turf. Okay, and it rained. Okay, and we have a great trainer, Eclipse Award trainer, and he called and said, we're going to take this and take a pass on it because it's coming off the turf. And I said, how do you know whether it can run on the dirt? He says, when you're a double. Anyway, Nitrogen won on both. I kind of think maybe you have to sometimes, okay, give horses a chance. Okay, all the smart people will tell you, well, it has to have a big hoof and all that kind of myth. It's so easy now to train, and especially to PETA. Okay, if you don't want to go all the way, halfway. There's so many ways you can experiment now that you couldn't before. Increase your chances by experimenting.
And I've heard it said that if you breed to race, breeding for the turf has many advantages because the purses and the availability of the races. Is there any truth in that from a breeding to race?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're okay with breeding to the turf, there's some great deals to be had with these turf stallions. Just for instance, our horse Johannes, he stands for $10,000. He's a turf horse, but a Grade 1 winning son by Nyquist, if he was a dirt horse, he'd be standing for $40,000. And same goes for like a horse like Carl Spackler. He was fantastic on the turf. He stands for like 12,500, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you're okay with just knowing to get a turf horse, if you're breeding a race, there's a lot of good deals to be had.
Okay, good point. Good to know.
So it's interesting. It's interesting with Johannes. We bred Johannes' mother, and we had Dan Starling, his second dam, and it's all a dirt family.
I know.
And I said to Jackie Demerick, who breaks and trains the horse, and I said, why on earth? This horse, it's all dirt family. Join the Dance was out of the second dam, and that was the closest we got to winning the Derby. And he was a very good horse on the dirt. And she told me it's because when he was a 2-year-old, he chipped on the dirt in a breeze and they had to take an ankle chip out. And they were afraid that if they ever ran him on the dirt again, he would chip an ankle. So it's interesting with that horse. That horse is actually bred for the dirt.
Yeah.
He may have been a reverse of Cigar. And if they tried him on the dirt, he may have been like, I mean, he was obviously a grade 1 winner, but it's interesting. And it's all the talk about of trying versus not trying. And I'm sure the same thing happens with dirt horses where they never get tried on the turf. And that's what Len's saying. What do you have to lose? If you put them on the dirt and they're no good, people say, oh, he was a turf horse. But if you put him on the dirt and he is good, then you got a $50,000 stallion.
Yes. Very good.
All
Very
right.
good. Okay.
Couple more questions. Here's one that just came in. How many years do you breed a brood mare who hasn't produced a winner or a runner before shutting her down or moving her out? I mean, how long do you give a mare an opportunity to produce?
Wow, that's a good question.
Yeah. Again, it's like it comes down to what you've seen. I mean, if she's just been unlucky, like she's had good physicals and, you know, things that aren't related to athleticism somehow prevented that progeny from running or from winning, then I think you try again until something tells you that it's not the risk of, you know, just the time and the money and just the production of putting foals out there that, you know, aren't competitive outweighs the, you know, possibility that she could throw a good one.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to every rule, but the statistics show you if the mare hasn't had a good horse within the first 4, she's highly unlikely to produce something in her subsequent years. I mean, not saying she can't, because like I said, she can't, but you better have some excuses in those first 4 as to why the horse they weren't any good.
No, definitely fair enough. Okay.
Gary, can I just throw in again and being the optimist? Okay. We actually say every year in our strategy, okay, we're going to have at least 2 brood mares, okay, who nobody else would want. Okay, either hasn't produced or doesn't look the part or whatever. And then we take the extra time to actually investigate, okay, something about the mare. Who has it been gone to before? Did it lose something? Because you can find some hidden gems that again, with all due respect, Walker, that you guys wouldn't be interested in. But the little guy might very well be interested in because he might take a shot at something that has a great pedigree, comes from a family of, you know, I mean, if I could buy a mare out of the Claiborne family, okay, which has been producing, but this one didn't. I'm not saying you guys were wrong in cutting it after 4 years, but man, I might want that to be one of the 2 of them or Phipps family, etc., that I would take a shot at.
Sure.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Maybe we bred them the wrong stallions. You know, if we've bred them all the Danzig line or something, they need that certain different kind of sire line, you know. So you can definitely spot the mares that, you know, you would want to take a chance on. And like you said, those deep families, they always come back and produce over time.
They really do. They really do.
Okay. Well, last question. So in breeding to race, how do you take into account the soundness of the stallion and the soundness of the mare? Stallions had 4 starts, 1, 2 of them. Mare was unraced. Maybe she had some issues. I mean, are there certain things a newcomer should look for if they intend to breed to race to hopefully get a sound horse?
And what I say is it's different when you're looking at a weanling. It's different when you're looking at a yearling, even a 2-year-old. All those physical things come into play. Once a horse has already done something, okay, on the track and has proven something on the track, okay, you look to see what it did when it won and versus what it did when it didn't win. And was it the trainer difference, or was it the track difference, or was blah, 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 blah difference? Or if you gave that horse time off, okay, could you then straighten something out that was, I just don't go by rules of thumb. I think to make money in this business, you got to do things differently.
Okay. Carrie, when you breed a a young mare off the track to a stallion, do you take into account his soundness?
Well, I think a lot of stallions are retired sound because of the incredible expense that it costs to maintain. I mean, I remember somebody complaining recently about one of the stallions that retired and it only had 7 starts. And I said, well, I think In the Mischief only had 6. But when he won his grade 1, Wayne decided to retire him. That horse was, In the Mischief was perfectly sound. And so for us, I think the big shift you've seen in our farm, and if anyone looked at our buying, is we are now trying to really, if we're adding mares to our ridiculously large broodmare band, we're trying to add stakes mares, because I know Len probably knows the actual number to this, but I have always been told for every 1 stakes mare versus 56 non-black type mares to produce a stakes horse. And so we've really shifted our focus to, I was slow, and I can admit I was slow. The chances of me being fast, producing a fast, so we look at it kind of, if I was Flojo or some Olympic athlete, I would have a much better chance. And I think you actually see that in humans a lot. If you look, the quarterback, the Kelsey brothers, and, families, the athletes tend to produce the athletes. So that's why you've seen a big shift in our farm. And then if there is a mare that we're buying that is not a stakes mare, we kind of look to the excuse. Was she in a cardia placentitis foal like the dam of Torpedo Anna? There's all kinds of extenuating circumstances. But if there's not extenuating circumstances, I certainly would much prefer a mare that was of stakes caliber, especially 2 or 3-year-old stakes caliber.
Okay. Kate and Walker, can you chime in on this whole soundness topic?
Yeah, I would definitely do some due diligence when you go to buy one. I mean, like I think we talked about earlier, we have fillies that they might just make 1 or 2 starts and you're going to see unplaced, but it's because we couldn't run them back in the spot where they could win. So we just went ahead and shipped them home. They're not unsound. Maybe they were going to develop later on, but back to Len's point, it is a business, and you got the carrying costs of hoping to break one's maiden throughout the 3-year-old year. Probably isn't worth the opportunity to go ahead and send her home and get her in full and start her a year earlier. So there's a lot of business decisions to be made, like in terms like that. Doesn't necessarily mean they're unsound. It also just might be they weren't going to win at Saratoga or Keeneland or Churchill Downs, and we were kind of out of options.
Okay, Kate.
Yeah, and I think I would just echo too, there's a lot of information you can get about stallions and, mares and their own soundness, or, reasons why they did or didn't kind of reach a certain level. So I would just encourage you to, and again, like that's the beauty of breeding to race is your horses. That is that's one of the huge things is there's no guessing games. When it was sick as a foal, you may not know if it has a chip because you may not have any reason to x-ray it. And that's kind of an interesting aspect of being breed to race as well.
Okay. Walker, how many starts did Danzig have? 2?
3.
1? 3? Okay, yeah. So there's a horse that did great things and had just a very modest career. So okay, so that wraps up the Q&A. Thank you, audience, for all your questions. If you have any follow-up questions for our speakers, we're going to put up on the screen everyone's name and email address that you can follow up with them later on. And don't feel you have to write these down right now because all of this is recorded and we'll have the recorded version up in a day or 2 where you can come back to the screen. So really like to thank the panelists for your time, your insights, great topic. Very important topic. So thank you, Kate. Thanks, Walker, Carrie, Len. Good to see you again. Thanks for all your insights on this important topic.
Thanks for having me.
But mostly, I'd really like to thank the audience for being here and to all owners who invest in our sport. We have many stakeholders 100%. In our industry, but it's always been my belief that owners are the most important and needed participant in our industry. So thank you very much, owners. We're going to be back in April with a new topic. So until then, stay safe, and we hope you visit the Winner Circle and you visit it often. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.